In 1929, stock prices began to drop. Panicked, people traded in their stocks, but that just made it drop even more, and billions of dollars were lost. There were bank failures, reductions in purchasing. These things led to what came to be known as the Great Depression. Herbert Hoover, the president at the time, responded to this crisis with the Mexican Repatriation Act, in which he sent a bunch of Mexicans and Mexicans-Americans back to Mexico to free up jobs for white Americans, but that didn't really help much. New stock market and bank regulations were put into place, but this really didn't do anything to help immediate issues. Simultaneously, because of poor farming techniques and severe drought, what came to be known as the Dust Bowl happened. Many farmers had to sell their fields at no profit to pay off taxes because they had yielded no crop. A lot of people responded to the Depression and the Dust Bowl by relocating to urban areas from rural ones. About 43,000 others, known as the Bonus Army, they responded by marching on Washington and demanding cash for their service certificates. When Franklin D. Roosevelt took office, he implemented something called the New Deal, which involved a lot of different programs with different aims that all had the larger purpose of making people's lives better. He ended prohibition, urged people to put their money back into banks, after he decided which ones were viable, of course. He created tons of jobs for unemployed people. He was the president who introduced Social Security and unemployment security. In his first 100 days in office, he had 12 bills passed to help alleviate Depression stresses. A lot of the programs received positive feedbacks, but some of them were deemed unconstitutional and weren't really liked. There were some of them that the Supreme Court wouldn't pass because they were a different party than FDR, which led him to packing the court with his supporters so the programs would get passed. That's not really something you should do. These New Deal programs helped symptoms of the Depression, but they really didn't do anything to end it. During this time, the United States wasn't as involved in foreign affairs as it had been. It was more concerned with itself. This is called isolationism. As fascism rose in Europe, the United States didn't interfere except for to send a letter to Hitler, which he made fun of publicly. They held the same do-nothing attitude as the rest of the world on Japanese expansion in the Pacific and Asia in the 30s. As World War II dawned and more countries began to resist the Japanese and German regimes, America ended up providing Great Britain with weapons and warships. Back to World War II, America joined it after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. It brought about major changes on the home front. With so many men gone, this period was the dawn of women in the workplace, as well as students, retirees, and previously unemployed people. Most modern Americans look on this event, women working, and rejoice. I mean, to be fair, it marks an event in history when women were considered independent and were in fact depended on to keep the nation's productivity up. They were allowed to work, not just be housewives, but this meant that both parents were out of the house most of the day. This wasn't just freedom for women, this was freedom for kids as well, so where were the kids going to go after school? Where were they going to get their breakfast or their dinner when neither parent had time to cook it for them? These problems led to the eventual rise of daycare and fast food industries. Yeah, World War II is the reason for that McDonald's down the street. It caused an entirely different means of eating, and now more people eat out at fast food restaurants than cook at home. Whether or not this cultural norm can be cited as a leading cause for obesity or other health problems in the United States, well, that one's up to you. Over the course of the war, technology was developed that otherwise would never have been dreamt of. The atom bomb, which killed thousands of Japanese people immediately and even more from radiation afterward, would have taken years to complete hadn't wartime not made it a necessity. Penicillin was perfected and became accessible because of how many soldiers were dying from infection in the battlefield. Jerry cans, pressurized cabins, synthetic rubber, these were all invented because of things that were happening in the war. And computers, too. Yeah, the very thing this presentation is being displayed on in front of you right now, this developed. It's because of the German Enigma code in World War II. which, if you're interested about that, you should check out that movie, The Imitation Game, with that guy, Benedict Cucumber or whatever. Yeah, it's interesting, right? The next war in American history, the Cold War, consisted of many indirect battles with the Soviet Union. It was a time of rivalry between the two world powers, with lots of economic and political fluctuation in the U.S. The United States and the Soviet Union battled over who was supreme in all areas: government, military, technology, but it never proceeded to the battlefield, mostly because of mutually assured destruction, which basically said that if it actually did proceed to the battlefield, everyone would be dead, so let's not do that. Mostly they were just threats. I'm gonna get to space before you, and I'm just gonna set these missiles down right here. The actions of the communists prompted American rebuttals and vice versa. This is most clearly illustrated by two very distinct events. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, Earth's first artificial satellite, into low orbit. Its only purpose was to send out simple radio frequencies that could be tracked, which provided useful information about the conditions at the edge of our atmosphere. But as benign as this seemed, the American government panicked, understandably, and promptly started developing their own satellite. A competition came out of this that drove the two competing powers to achieve scientific and technological victory. For America, this victory would only come when a man had been sent to the moon and returned safely. The result of this race, the space race, was a massive boost in technological advancement and a widespread confidence in the ability of man. The 1960s began an era of social change, beginning with the progress of the civil rights movement. Segregation was made illegal, voting rights legislation was passed, and busing was introduced to many districts to end the de facto segregation of schools. The American perception of this civil rights movement was heavily impacted by the media portrayal of protests, which were intentionally nonviolent. Progressive societal improvement of legislature was part of Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society plan to change America for the better. Lyndon B. Johnson hoped that by making the Vietnam War an American issue, he could bolster support for increasing involvement. But this plan was not successful, and America had to resort to the selective service, or the draft, for soldiers. This, along with the constant news coverage of the war, caused many citizens to oppose America's foreign involvement. There were lots of anti-war protests, and the attitude towards the Vietnam War was not positive. On the contrary, Richard Nixon, when he took office, sought to make the Vietnam War a Vietnamese issue, not an American one, in order to pull troops out and ease tensions with dignity. This was called détente. In an attempt to secure the next election, the Nixon administration broke into Democratic National Committee headquarters. This is now known as Watergate. Nixon was charged with obstruction of justice for refusing to yield complete tapes from his recorded White House meetings. He had resigned to avoid impeachment. In his place, Gerald Ford continued. So, this war was a social one, not just an overseas one. The whole dynamic of America changed. Society of this era developed a different mindset and different morals as a result of war. In the 1980 elections, Ronald Reagan ran on a Republican platform of cutting down welfare fraud, decreasing the national deficit, and strengthening national defense and prestige. He was already nationally known from his successful time as governor of California and from TV appearances, radio spots, newspaper columns. He won by an overwhelming electoral vote majority thanks to Reagan Democrats. This was a term used to describe voters who were traditionally Democrat but who defected from their party to support Reagan in the 1980 election and the 1984 election, too. The Cold War was still going on at this time. Reagan didn't agree with the détente policy of just preventing the spread of communism. With the Reagan Doctrine, he emphasized military preparedness, and he made aggressive moves to actually end the Cold War and the spread of communism. In 1985, when Mikhail Gorbachev assumed power in the Soviet Union, their economy was weak. Parts of the USSR were revolting and becoming independent. It was only a matter of time after this until the Soviet Union disbanded and became Russia. To avoid the risk of rambling, I've compressed the rest of the information, but there's enough there for my eventual conclusion to be comprehensive. George H.W. Bush was the next president, and he sent troops to Panama, but the situation at home in the U.S. continued to suffer a faltering economy, rising deficit, and increased violence and crime rate. He also removed Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. After Clinton was kicked out, the 2000 election was really confusing, but George W. Bush won. He cut federal funding on stem cell research, and he advanced the education reform bill. Then came 9/11. Two overtaken airliners hit the Twin Towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001. It was not an accident that the date was 9/11 either. One of the planes flew into the side of the Pentagon, and another hijacked jet attempted to fly into the White House or the Capitol building, but it was flown into a Pennsylvania field as the passengers attempted to retake the plane. Almost 3,000 people were killed. This attack on America by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda prompted the War on Terror. But this attack, too, it bonded America. One newspaper ad I saw